Why, hello there, and welcome back to the Agostinho Zinga show with me, your host, Agostinho Zinga, and this is episode number 378. That's 378. That's 378. ¿Cómo estás, mi amigos? Bien. Me, same old, just hanging on in there as best as I can during these difficult times. If it's your first time watching the show via YouTube, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. If you're listening via the podcast app, please leave me a 5-star review, download the show, share it with your friends, pop it into the back of an Oyster card, throw that Oyster card on the floor, wait for somebody to pick it up, chase them across the road, and they pick it up, slam them against the wall, take the Oyster card back, get on the train, head to work, chuck it in the bin and wait for someone to pick it up afterwards, and then continue downloading the show. Not too much rocks in it, not too much to ask for there in that regard. And also you can support the show via Patreon. Don't forget that Patreon link is down below in the comments. You'll be able to find it. There's a pinned comment there. For as little as $1 per month, you can obviously support the show, help it to grow, allow me to buy a new GoPro. That's what I want to buy. Yeah, I need to buy a GoPro Hero 9. So if you want to support the GoPro Hero 9 fund, make sure you click and subscribe via Patreon. For that, you also get this full podcast in audio format before anybody else. So it always comes out on the day that I record it via Patreon before you get it anywhere else. It's like 3 or 4 days ahead of being on YouTube or being available on Spotify or iTunes. So make sure you do that. Support the guy on Patreon. Patreon.com/Agostinho. That's patreon.com/AGOSTINHO. For as little as $1 per month. Link should be in the description or in the pinned comments, or wherever you're hearing or listening to this. Don't delay. Get involved on Patreon today. Okay, cool. Yeah, man, what else has been going on? I guess the major news in the UK, for the most part, things have been, blowing up the timeline, heating up the airwaves, and causing debate and controversy all over the nation, are these new COVID-19 restrictions that have hit most of the UK, Scotland, and Wales for the most part. Of course, I'm just going to focus on the UK for now because that's where I'm at. But yeah, man, it's been a bit of a tough pill to swallow for some people. I think, like I've mentioned maybe in a few other shows, I still get the feeling, maybe not so much now because, of course, the new restrictions have come into place or have been, they've been outlined. But I think in the beginning, or maybe during the summer, I still had this impression that a lot of people were kind of holding out hope that, number one, we would get a vaccine by the end of the year, or that somehow we'd get back to normal by the end of the year. I don't know why they had that expectation. Maybe it was just, trying to be optimistic. Maybe they had other bits of information, but whatever it is, I always had that feeling. Because of course, walking around the area, going about my everyday life, going to do some food shopping and just hanging about, you'd see people kind of not really acting as if like there's a global pandemic happening at the moment, right? Sort of like just living life as they're living it. And most of it, if anything, isn't the fault of the people. It's mostly the fault of the government, right? The leadership from the top has been pretty wishy-washy, a bit hands-offy. What was that phrase they used about letting the great British public use their common sense or something along those lines, right? Just kind of it's, if anything, what's that term that you call it? It's like it's like plausible deniability in some way, shape or form, innit, right? Instead of kind of being forceful with the rules or strict with it, they'd rather be hands off, so that if anything does go wrong, you can't exactly blame them because they kind of gave you some vague general sort of guidelines, and if anything goes untoward, then it isn't for them to be pulled up on about it. But I kind of got that feeling. But I think now, obviously, with these new restrictions updates, some really, really tough ones, ones that probably need to have happened anyway in order to kind of get things back up to normal. But it's just, part of me thinks, God damn it, man, if only the government would have been this forceful, would have been this forthright, would have been this direct, would have been this blunt and honest about the situation in the beginning, we would have been in a far better place. Instead of trying to, because that's what happened, right? If anything, we got the kind of political version of what Trump did when Trump tried to say, hey, I'm going to be positive. Here's what you mentioned to Bob Woodward for that book that's out at the moment called Rage or something, right? He kind of leaked that he purposely tried to downplay the virus, which, I think most leaders should try to remain calm and not, yeah, I think even if you hate Trump, you can understand his rationale, but he went like crazy in terms of in how he responded in public, right? He would always dismiss it, say it's a China problem, say it's no issue, it'd go away. But privately, he knew how deep of an issue it was, but he was trying to remain calm. But he didn't really, he didn't really do that, right? He didn't really achieve that. But I think the UK government did, right? They did really well in that regard, dumbing down the virus, telling people to get back to work, telling people to go on holiday, telling kids to go back to school, which kind of, again, these are all things that are probably crucial in terms of the wellness and, whatever, the economy of our country, blah, 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 blah. But these things together in tandem, back to back, just kind of sent the wrong message. It made it seem as if like we were doing well when we weren't. Then I remember there was a period where people were going on summer holidays and shit, and then you looked at it and you thought to yourself, especially if you were going on these holidays, you think to yourself, hold on, why are we going on holidays in countries that have been in far worse positions than us are not, and they had to stay in place? It didn't make any sense really, innit? And then I guess some of these business techno parties started popping up in places, and it just kind of left a little bad taste in the mouth, innit? It kind of made it, no, it just made you confused. So I guess these restrictions are meant to clear up some of that confusion in the UK. So this headline from the BBC says the coronavirus new COVID restrictions could last up to 6 months, which again was the big thing that kind of triggered the timeline. For me, I don't mind. I'd rather I don't care how long it takes. I just want it to take as long as it takes so that we can get back to normal. I'm on that, but of course I wouldn't want to be living under these restrictions for 2 years and shit, or 5, whatever it may be. But however long it takes for us to get this done so that we can return to normal life, I'm for. And I'm not ignorant enough to believe that somehow we're going to sort this out in a month or two. It's not going to happen, because we had nearly a year to sort it out. We didn't, so it is what it is. So this is from BBC. It says the following. It says the UK has reached a perilous turning point. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said as he set out a raft of new coronavirus restrictions. Shop staff will have to wear face masks, and weddings will have to be limited to a maximum of 15 people under the new rules. Fines for breaking the rules on laws on gatherings and not wearing a mask will increase £200. Again, very clear warnings for the things that you're not meant to do. But again, I just wish this would happen before, right in the beginning with all this nonsense. Just do it anyway. He also warned a significantly greater restrictions could come if necessary, right? Again, clear warnings telling you what it's all about. Mr. Johnson said similar steps would be taken across the UK after he met with the leaders of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland on Tuesday morning. Like England, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon also announced a 10 o'clock curfew for hospitality businesses. The same measure is also set to come into force in Wales. Of course, the hospitality thing I'm dubious about. I mentioned previously that guy called Jonathan Downey, who I follow on Twitter, actually made a comment that supposedly only 5% of COVID cases have come from the hospitality industry. So this myth that supposedly the hospitality industry is a place that's sort of sparking the virus isn't true. Now, to give the government some slack, I don't think they're saying that by closing the pubs earlier. I just think they're just trying to avoid the dreaded mingling, right? That's what they want to avoid. And they kind of think if they kind of get pubs out of the way, it will effectively keep people indoors, because that's part of the issue too, right? Because we head into the winter months, most of the people that I've listened to online, especially the pub owners and the landlords and all that sort of stuff, they've kind of said that their best business happens in the winter, especially in the UK. I guess winter months, people want to be indoors next to a fake log cabin and drinking their beers, having a bit of chit chat with their friends. So if they limit the hours, or they, even if it's just by 1 hour, because, pubs in the UK usually in smaller towns close by 11 anyway. So if they limit by 1 hour, it sort of makes, it might as well be 9 by that time, innit? Because most people will probably leave before 10 anyway, or the pub will start to thin out, blah, 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 blah. So it's a good way to sort of program the population not to be outdoors. So I think that's probably the main point of it. It's not so much that, we're going to stop the pubs from opening later because we're fearing that they're spreading the virus. It's more so we just don't want people to be out full stop. So if we limit their business hours, it's going to put in people's head that, hey, we can't really go anywhere. And then, of course, during the winter months, you can't do park drinks anymore. You can't go to bloody, some trendy park somewhere with your double sole shoes and your, and rolling your bloody, rolling your cigarettes and stuff. You can't do that in the winter months. You kind of have to be indoors, house parties, whatever it may be. So if they're limiting the amount of people you can meet, and they're also limiting the amount of hours the pubs are open for, it sort of cuts out a huge chunk of the people that are going out, in my opinion. It continues to say that Miss Sturgeon went further than England on restrictions, banning the visiting of other households indoors. Wow. It comes after the number of UK cases rose to 4,926 on Tuesday, with the deaths increasing by 37. Speaking in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister told the MP he always knew that while we might have driven the virus into the retreat, the prospect of going a second wave was real. I'm sorry that as in Spain, France, and many other countries, we've reached a perilous turning point. And again, like those other countries though, because I think he mentioned something about, oh, the UK is free and we got free speech and but basically they did a proper lockdown and they still got a second spike. So we were always destined to get one. But the difference is that they were so used to already obeying the rules in some extent. Don't get me wrong, they did obviously skirt some rules, but they had something in place where they knew how harsh the restrictions could get. So once stuff started to reopen again, they were well behaved, right? That's the issue. So part of the problem you think in the UK is that if they did reopen stuff, like people would go absolutely nuts. And part of my fear actually when they did introduce new restrictions was that they were going to introduce them on a Monday, and then that would have meant the weekend coming up would have been just people just getting absolutely hammered. But instead they kind of used their brains and they decided to implement the changes on a Thursday, which kind of gives, you know, the hospitality industry a time to sort of adjust, I guess, the new settings, and it gives people the time to adjust as well to the new rule change. It continues to say, Mr. Johnson said the new rules were carefully judged to achieve the maximum reduction in the R number, which measures how quickly the virus is spreading, while causing the minimum damage to lives and livelihood. But he said this was by no means a return to the full lockdown in March. And then we continued that by looking at a video, quick recap of Boris Johnson talking about it or addressing the nation via The Guardian.
We must take action now. I know that we can succeed because we have succeeded before. When the sickness took hold in this country in March, we pulled together in a spirit of national sacrifice and...
Not much though. It lasted like 2 weeks. After that, people were just like doing what they wanted to do. And that's the thing as well, I think, is another misnomer. It's as if people, I don't know, misnomer. Yeah, because he uses this term about what's that term? It's some flipping English folklore thing that he always keeps saying, right? What is it about? Something stitching a nine, bloody blah blah, whatever that term he does, right? It's some Shakespearean thing he's always talking about, right? And it's sort of like a proverb for not being lazy and kind of addressing the issue now before the issue gets bigger, blah blah blah. But I don't really think it's a laziness thing. People somehow think it's that people are not bothered to put masks on or not bothered to go and social distance. It's not that. I think some people have made a conscious decision that they don't think it's as serious as a threat, and they'd much rather take their chances to live their life and go about their everyday life and continue, you know, trying to make the best of it, than live in quote unquote fear. I think that's what it is. It's just a different, not ideological. It's just a different worldview. One group of people like myself think, hey, I'm going to obey the rules, wear a face covering, you know, wash my hands, all this sort of good stuff. And it's one side that just doesn't agree with that notion whatsoever. So it isn't really about convincing them. It's just about doing what's right for the greater good. You know what I mean? That's what I think anyway.
Guidance to the letter. We stayed at home, protected the NHS, and saved thousands of lives. And while the vast majority have complied with the rules, there have been too many breaches, too many opportunities for our invisible enemy to slip through undetected.
And this is a good thing, right? It's a good thing that he's addressing the nation like this. He did it in the House of Commons. He also did it with some press, and then now he's doing this briefing to the nation. I think this is good. He's being forceful. He's trying to be forthright. He's trying to, you know, sort of like, you know, be as direct as he can. But hey, where was this energy in the beginning, my friend? Where was this energy in March? Where was this energy when you were... Because imagine if there was an incentive of eat out, help out, of like save your summer with this message at the beginning. Imagine this message came to you at April, May, before the eat out, help out thing even started, and said, hey, if we get this number down, if we really smash this virus, if we do our best to make sure we contain this thing, here's your reward, nation. Summer holidays, eat out, help out, all this, whatever's a freedom of movement, whatever. That would have been a good way to combat things. But instead, no, hands off approach, common sense, stay alert, all these different codes and mantras and Nando's alert systems and all this nonsense and people ducking interviews, and now look where we are.
The virus has started to spread again in an exponential way. A tougher package of national measures combined with the potential for tougher local restrictions for areas already in lockdown. And as for that minority who may continue to flout the rules, We will enforce those rules with tougher penalties and fines of up to £10,000.
Again, I'm not too sure how this is going to work, if they're going to work in any way, shape or form, because I just think there's just a divide in the country. I think COVID deniers are what they are, and it's just you can't really convince them otherwise. So that's a lot of fighting you're going to be doing if that's the case.
We will put more police out on the streets and use the army to backfill if necessary.
That is insane. They're going to use the army. So if it wasn't enough to fob in your mates or to fob in your neighbors, now they're gonna call the army in to get you in line. That is a madness. And if you saw those protests in London between the Black Lives Matter and some of the some of our veterans, some of our military folk, then you would know, if those military guys come out on the street, and you happen to be of a different complexion to Boris Johnson, you might want to stay indoors.
The reality of having COVID is that your mild cough can be someone else's death knell. And if we were forced...
If only he was using these analogies in the beginning. Imagine he was this direct in the beginning. Honestly, I know I'll keep stopping this, but just imagine if he was this direct in the beginning, what it could have done, the difference it could have made, the lives it could have saved. God damn it. Do you think politicians get punished for their incompetence, or is it just like hey, you just had a bad term and you just get over it? It's like it feels like if you're a politician, you just end up and you do a bad job. You're like that kind of shitty actor in a soap opera. No one's gonna ask for you to get fired. No one's gonna throw tomatoes on you in the street. But when people see you, they know you were the worst version of whatever villain that was in that series. They know you was a bit of a shitty dad in the TV series. You only had one face. Right, but you're allowed to carry on. You might end up in another series. You might end up going to a Spanish-speaking country and doing a telenovela. But I think that's how politicians get treated. It's as if you do a really terrible job and nothing happens. You don't lose any money. You don't lose any status. You don't lose any opportunities. Your reputation doesn't suffer even in that regard. It's just he was just he did a bad job. A bad job. This is worse than a bad job.
Into a new national lockdown. That would threaten not just jobs and livelihoods, but the loving human contact on which we all depend. It would mean renewed loneliness and confinement for the elderly and vulnerable. And
bruv, we're all lonely, man. I'm not elderly, I'm lonely. How about us?
Ultimately, it would threaten once again the education of our children. We must do all we can to avoid going down that road again. But if people don't follow the rules we've set out, then we must reserve the right to go further. Things will be far better by the spring.
Further is 6 months. Spring is next year. And again, I'm okay with it because that was my prediction in the beginning. I always predicted that we were going to be under some kind of lockdown or restriction in movement, or kind of, a break from normality until the end of the year. Again, it's just my analogy of being in a house party and having the police come around and break it up. It never really restarts the same way. It takes a while to kind of get going, and sometimes it doesn't kind of, the magic never returns. As soon as the police, even when they come and say it's okay and they leave, the magic never returns. It's sort of like done, right? It just dampens the mood and sort of changes the frequency, the vibrations in there. Same thing happens with this. I just think when the government closes an economy down and tells people to stay in place, shuts off different sectors, it's very difficult, if not near impossible, to get that done, to get that restarted within a 6-month period. So regardless of how long this virus lasts, you always have to tack on another year to kind of getting stuff back up to normal again. You just have to kind of, government's just moved too slow. There's too much red tape, too much bureaucracy for anything else to happen quicker than that. Even the vaccine. Think how long it's going to take to vaccinate everybody when the vaccine comes around. It's not going to be like a week process. It's going to take months and months, especially if, and that's just hoping there's no complications along the way.
When we have not only the hope of a vaccine, but one day soon, and I must stress that we're not there yet, of mass testing so efficient that people will be able to be tested in minutes so they can do more of the things they love. That's the hope. That's the dream. If we follow these simple rules...
He's telling us a dream about testing, and people are going to... What is it someone said the other day? Someone mentioned that they tried to get a test and they were told to go to Aberdeen. They tried to go to Scotland to go get a test, and they live in London. That was the nearest place to go get a test. Nearest.
We will get through this winter together. There are unquestionably difficult months to come, and the fight against COVID is by no means over. And I have no doubt, however, that there are great days ahead. But now is the time for us all to summon the discipline and the resolve and the spirit of togetherness that will carry us through.
Man, some budget Churchill, man. F out of here, man. Terrible job. Again, I don't mind that we have to do these changes. It is what it is. You know, we're in a bad position right now. We have to get it done. But just the amount of time that was wasted, man. Like, if you just would have done a serious lockdown in the beginning, it would have appeased everybody, even the COVID deniers. You just tell them to be indoors for 2 months, shut the fuck up. You give them money. Yeah, I mean, whatever it may be. Let them rant and rave. You get us a lockdown for 2 months. We bang it out. We get the numbers down where they need to be. We keep, and then, you know, we slowly and surely open up different areas of the economy. The people that are more vulnerable, you tell them to stay in place. You don't push people to go back to work. You just, that's it. Working from the offices is done until a vaccine's around. You know, that kind of stuff. But at least the economy is reopened. People can still move and kind of, you know, business can flow. Supply chains are not broken. Blah, 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 blah. But instead, look what happened. Hands-off approach. Go to Mykonos. Go and flip it and, you know, get yourself a half price Pizza Express. You know, whoever's doing, even sometimes I question even the decisions people made during the whole help out I think, but whatever, at least the solution's been done in some regard. We're on our way to some kind of recovery. But yeah, if you're in the UK, let me know how you feel, man. 6 months, man. 6 months we're gonna be in lockdown. 6 months, another 6 months. So let me know what you're feeling out there. If you're in the UK, let me know what your vibe is in the comments down below. Okay, move on. Let's move on from that one. News in the hip-hop front. Unfortunately, if you're a fan of Bobby Shmurda, he was denied bail recently. So unfortunately, I think there was a big push in hip-hop, it seemed. I think because he might have been signed, I guess he's signed to Rock Nation, or he has some ties with some big label. But regardless, but just basically because he's a stand-up dude and he didn't do what he did, basically the opposite of what 6ix9ine did when he ended up getting busted by the feds. And there was a hope that he would be back by the end of summer. Obviously they might have been hoping to kind of, you know, do the whole coronavirus hustle that 6ix9ine ended up doing, you know, saying he had asthma and all this sort of nonsense. But unfortunately that didn't work for Bobby Shmurda, maybe because he broke, you know, he's not been his best behavior in prison, but he's basically been denied parole, and he's going to be stuck in prison until the end of his prison term. Now this could just be the prosecutor being like, you know, or the judge being like, hey, we need to say as an example, because Bobby Shmurda and his friends were basically put in prison for some pretty heavy charges, right? So I'm sure they wanted to send a message, a deterrent to anybody else that might want to get involved in the activities that they were convicted for, that, you know, it's unacceptable. And I guess regardless of his stardom, they just didn't want to buckle. So unfortunately, if you're a fan of his, you have to wait until next year or the end of next year for an early release. They might end up appealing it, but I don't think parole or early release works that way. But this is from TMZ, said Bobby Shmurda, parole denied, stuck in prison until 2021. Said like the rest of the world, Bobby Shmurda has little to no reason to celebrate 2020 because it's not going to prison just yet, despite his high hopes that he would. Law enforcement sources tell TMZ Bobby was denied parole after his interview with the board last week. No reason was given as to why, but we're told almost certainly going to be held in custody until the very end of his max sentence, which is December 11th, 2021. We know Bobby was not being helping his own case while doing his time. Remember, the rapper racked up 11 violations, including drug possession, fighting and having a shank, and a good behavior clearly weighs heavily on the parole board. So, you know, those things, it's all like similar to, like, you remember when Meek Mill got sent back to prison for breaking his probation by doing wheelies on the street, and then, you know, he got the entire hip hop, you know, to ban around and get him released due to his own mistake. It feels like that kind of vibe, innit? If you're in prison and you've got the backing of some of the big labels and, you know, some real big cosigns in the industry, you probably owe it to them and to yourself to really keep your nose clean. Now, that's easy to be said from the outside in. We don't know what reality is living with, you know, having to live in a, you know, having to basically spend, you know, the 6+ years in a federal prison, especially, you know, knowing how popular he was at that time of going in there too. It probably is a whole different vibe. So I understand it, but it's just a shame, innit? It continues, said, as we reported, he copped a plea deal back in September 2016 to conspiracy to possess weapons and possession of a weapon. The other charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, were tossed. Bobby was initially sentenced to 67 years of prison and has been in since December 2014. Jesus Christ. Bobby Shmurda broke the story. Bobby's mother told us her son was ready to drop new music if granted parole, and he also produced a documentary about his life in the hopes it could be used as an educational tool for troubled youth. So yeah, again, sad news, but I guess still he has a possibility of coming out, so that's also great in it. He's still got his whole career in front of him, you know, opportunity to change his life for the better, and I think his fans will be more than happy to wait another year. If you wait this long for Bobby Shmurda, you're definitely going to be happy to wait another year in it. So as bad as that news is, I'm sure he'll be fine. Moving on, what's this one? We've got this story about a single plane passenger jet. No, it's just moving on. No more COVID talk. Flip that. Next story here. We have a story that I guess should be hopefully a cautionary tale. Hopefully a good wake-up call for this said individual, because I'm a big fan of his. I think he's easily one of the best new rappers to emerge on the scene, maybe one of the most improved too, from the time that I first saw him to how he's developed now, and it's just generally been crushing it, especially with these visuals. Probably has one of the best video teams in the game, hands down, and it's DaBaby. Big fan of his. Again, I don't really subscribe to the idea that he only has one flow. I think he's very versatile. I think he has his own lane carved out, especially for a young artist, not in age, I mean in terms of just artistry. He's very young in the game. For him to have a particular sound that's very discernible, a particular cadence, a particular aesthetic, without really, it doesn't feel like he's tried that hard anyway to find it. So just imagine what will happen once he really starts to concentrate on making great music and great bodies of work. The sky's the limit for this guy. And again, the visuals are just insane in terms of what he does. But unfortunately, you know, as with all amazing people, he has a little bit of a dark side. And that dark side is that he doesn't tolerate disrespect. He just doesn't, under any circumstance, whether you're a female, whether you're a kid, whether you're a grown man, whatever you are, if you come at DaBaby the wrong way, he will definitely set you straight. And unfortunately, because he's so big, he's like the closest thing we have to like a new Ludacris or something, right? He's at that weird level where he's like really well regarded in the kind of streets, and he's also very much accepted in the pop world, sort of like the general public world, right? Kids all over the place love him, innit? So you see, it's really interesting whenever you see videos of him on the streets, and then fans are coming up and, you know, wanting his autograph, wanting selfies, and it's just so many different people, from mums to children to teenagers to young adults. It's just, he covers the whole gamut, because obviously he's one of the more popping rappers out there and has some big features on big pop records. But you know, that dark side of his gets him into a lot of trouble, because he's a man of the people. He's out in the streets, even if he has security, he kind of, you know, touches, hugs and kisses people, obviously prior to COVID, but that's going to cause issues, and this is one of them. Since the story from Complex, that DaBaby sued for an altercation with a Beverly Hills hotel employee. This happened, I think, sometime last year, but I think you remember the video of him sort of like, you know, giving the business or putting the pressure on some hotel employee kid, supposedly because he was taking pictures of him while he was in there, and DaBaby got annoyed that he was kind of putting the safety of his child in jeopardy, and blah 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 blah. It was really aggressive, very unnecessary for the crime that was that he kind of took place. But again, at the time, you could have understood the reason and you kind of let it moved on. But somehow, not sure why, but somehow the kids decided to sue DaBaby over the altercation. I don't know what prompted it, but let's continue the story. It says here, DaBaby is being sued for his altercation with a Beverly Hills hotel employee. TMZ reports the incident took place in December 2019 at the AC Hotel at the Marriott in Beverly Hills, and was captured by the building surveillance cameras. In the footage, the rapper can be seen following the chef Christophe Pocasangre into the building and pushing him into a chair. After talking to the man, DaBaby and a member of his team exited the building. Right, I remember this video. Let's play it now a little bit for you. That's the guy there walking in, the chef, I guess, with his chef clothes on. He gets absolutely draped and pushed to the wall, sat down in a chair, and then they're over him, putting in the pressure, pointing the finger in his face. He's got his leg over him, proper sunning, a huge sunning. And now you'd assume, if it's a hotel in the Beverly Hills, that most likely that kid was just being, or that chef was just being annoying and trying to sneak a picture, or whatever he was doing. But to kind of act that way and go to such extent, there must be more to the incident. You're hoping so, isn't it? Let's continue. So the chef claims that the altercation started because DaBaby refused to take a picture of him. So he took a selfie with DaBaby in the background. Again, you shouldn't be doing that, right? Especially, this is the thing I hate about fans. Some fans, you should know, if you're a fan of this artist, you should know what they're about from reading the events, watching interviews, from watching other people talk about this said artist, from reading in between the lines, creeping on the comments. You should know the character of the artist that you're dealing with. It's all like when you remember early in the day when when fans used to get annoyed with Tyler for not taking pictures or being awkward and weird. And it was like, it's pretty evident from how he carries himself that he's not the most comfortable when people are, being weird fangirls and guys to him, which is ironic considering how much of a fangirl Tyler unabashedly is for people like Pharrell and just other musicians that he likes. But he just doesn't deal with it well, innit? And he's kind of told his fans countless times, hey, don't be weird and ask for a picture, instead talk to me, have a conversation. But still, people ask for a picture, they get blanked, or he kind of keeps it moving, and then guess what, they go on social media, start complaining that Tyler's a bad guy. It's like, no, he's told you what he's about. He's shown you plenty of times that he's not about the whole taking pictures thing. Talk with him, have a chat, tell him what your favorite tune was of his album, mention something about the bridge, I don't know, whatever he likes. Same with DaBaby. He seems like somebody that doesn't really enjoy fans coming up to him when he's on his own, dolo, reliving his everyday life. He's okay. I think in crowds, it looks like when there's other fans around, he kind of turns on the artist mode. But when he's on his own and he's on daddy duties or just being a regular dude, being Kirk, he doesn't like fans coming up to him and taking pictures. It's just what it is. So the fans should have been respectful enough and just carried on moving. So you have to blame him for some extent, but of course, DaBaby, probably took it too far with the physical altercation. But it continues. DaBaby saw the man take the picture and told him to delete the photo. The chef says he deleted it on the spot, but this didn't satisfy the rapper, leading to the altercation. At the time of the incident, DaBaby confirmed that the chef asked for a picture and he declined because he was with his daughter. DaBaby then alleges the chef tried to film him while he was holding his daughter, despite him repeatedly asking the fans to stop. As a result, DaBaby felt like his daughter's safety was jeopardized, which led to the aggressive response. The hotel worker you see me pushing came up to me outside the hotel and asked for a recorded video while holding my 2-year-old daughter. DaBaby said on Instagram. I calmly and respectfully said no and explained to him that him posting a video of me and at the time would compromise the safety of me and my child, but it's in social media know where we were staying. Now the chef has slapped DaBaby with a lawsuit that includes accusation of assault, battery, infliction of emotional distress, and seeking unspecified damages. Now, I'm just confused as to why this came about now. I don't get it. I think if anything, if my memory serves me correct, being a big DaBaby fan, I think this might have been his last physical altercation with somebody. Maybe this was just before. Did this precede the girl slapping thing when he walked through the crowd and he ended up slapping some girl? He didn't know. I don't think he knew it was a girl. Someone just touched him the wrong way. And he just, of course, it's DaBaby. Look at his face, right? He doesn't take no shit. Look at that face. That's not a face someone takes shit. So he just reacted with a slap. That might be the only incident, but I think since then he sort of learned his lesson. He kind of avoids getting himself into any kind of fisticuffs, which is the best thing for him, even though he seems to be able to handle himself. But I'm curious to know why the kid decided to sue now. Like, what's the rationale behind that? Is that like hard times, COVID times, where people are just trying to find whatever money they can find behind the sofa, in between the cushions and shit? And this might be a good one where you remember, oh yeah, shit, I remember I got sunned by DaBaby in my hotel that I work at, innit? And he tried to sue him. I wonder what it is about that's going on. But again, I hope this is a lesson learned for people like DaBaby of his ilk. Again, he's probably in a class of his own in terms of what he does in the scene, but he's too big of an artist to be beating up random people. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't be doing that, man. Especially people that claim to be fans but they're annoying. You can't just go around hitting them. That's not the vibe. So yeah, hope DaBaby has learned from his misdemeanors there, and it kind of works out for him, all intents and purposes. Let's move on. What else is on here? Oh yeah, supposedly Quibi is looking to sell. Right? This is from Hypebeast. Quibi reporting to. Do you even use Quibi? It was a big deal. I'm not sure if it is even available here in the UK, but it was a flipping massive deal when it launched. They had a lot of really big celebrity partners that they kind of had on board, but now they're looking to sell in typical kind of startup fashion, in it. You build something, you prove that it works somehow, you inflate the numbers, or so allegedly, and then you try and sell you kind of use the numbers as leverage to kind of increase your IPO or to increase your buyout and get cash and then move on to the other thing. So that's why usually some of these apps, they never have the original founding team there when they kind of evolve. Maybe Snapchat's one of the only exceptions in that regard. Usually they replace them with a whole different people. It's like the Instagram when Facebook bought it, right? The two founders left immediately. It kind of it's its own little thing now existing within the Facebook ecosystem as opposed to where it was prior. But anyway, it says here from Hypebeast, according to a new report from the Wall Street Journal, the streaming platform Quibi is now exploring several strategic options, including a possible sale. Quibi originally launched in April early this year amid the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, hoping to tap into those staying at home due to social distancing and lockdown regulations. Yeah, one day, what's that app are people using to live stream? Maybe is that still around? I don't know. Let's continue. Regulations of content, premium content such as new seasons of Reno 999 and other original content, including Chrissy Teigen's Chrissy Court. That probably didn't do a good idea. Bad Ideas with Adam Devine. Despite its efforts, it's failed to compete against the likes of Netflix and Amazon Prime Video, and is now exploring other options. Because I think Quibi only works on smartphones, right? Is that it, or is it like an online streaming thing? I've never even tested it, to be fair. When Wall Street Journal watched out to Quibi, a spokesperson declined to comment on rumors or speculation, but said that Quib has successfully launched a new business and was pioneered a new form of storytelling and state-of-the-art platform. Meg and Jeffrey are committed to continuing to build the business in a way that gives the greatest experience for their customers, the greatest value of shareholders, and the greatest opportunity for employees. Again, nothing startup statement, but from what I know, from experience working in startups, this is definitely the standard startup hustle, right? You prove something works, you proof of concept, you get out to the market, you actually have active users on there, people revisiting the site, opening up the app, blah 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 blah, and then you try and get somebody else to basically buy out from you because you can't bother to, because you don't really see how else you can grow it, right? You kind of hit your ceiling, so you get someone else to sort of buy out your share or buy out the company overall and kind of move on. So let's see, maybe that works for them, but I don't know, man. From what I've kind of seen and from my lack of interest in it, it probably isn't a good omen going forward. And it might be one of those, it might be just, or maybe the person buying it might just be like, you know what, it's just good, it's not good money earned, but it's like, sometimes when you buy these apps, it's less so about the actual app itself and more so about the team working behind it or the technology that they're using, right? It's sort of like you buying intellectual property as opposed to, it's sort of like, yeah, you're buying the elements of the intellectual property as opposed to the intellectual property on the whole. Sorry, I keep messing up that phrase, intellectual property. But yeah, let's move on. What else we got to talk about here? This, that, the other. Hey, oh, cool. Yeah, let's jump into this one. Yeah. So, didn't I tell you guys prior that Bryan Callen's a little bit of a dum-dum in terms of how he's approaching these allegations? And this is coming from a fan, right? I'm a fan of T5K, I'm a fan of Callen, I'm a fan of what they've done and how they built up their brand and built their careers, and just, you know, I think, you know, especially in Bryan's case, he's definitely better when he's around other comedic giants in the podcasting space, right? Some of those Chris D'Elia and Will Sasso podcasts will go down in history, especially the early 10-minute podcast stuff. But some of those sessions where they sit down on the Fire and the Kid have been easily one of the best. I think that might actually be the most viewed video on the Fire and the Kid channel. The one where Brendan wasn't around, and it was just Chris D'Elia, Will Sasso, and Bryan Callen. It was an infamous one where Chris D'Elia went, "Oops." Do you remember that one, right? That was the one, right? Oh no, oops. It's the is it though? Right, that was the one. That was flipping like legendary. So I'm a big fan of his, right? But I've had a real issue with how he's dealt with these sexual assault allegations, or especially the more kind of serious allegations of rape. I think he's dealt with it in a really poor way, and it's really kind of encapsulated or really put a cherry on the top of a really disastrous year for Callen, from, you know, separating with his mother of his children, to getting the eyelid surgery, to securing his own show, or to securing securing a role in the show, getting a spin-off, the spin-off getting cancelled, being a COVID denier, and then suddenly now being embroiled, and again COVID denier throwing his friend Chris D'Elia under the bus to pretend like he doesn't know him, not backing him up in public, and then suddenly he's embroiled in his own sexual assault scandal, which if on paper is actually more serious of an offense than what Chris is being alleged to have done. Chris is alleged to have been a bit of a dog and tried to holler at everything that moved, that in states that he was visiting, but apart from that it doesn't really seem that bad if you look at it on paper, right? He didn't sexually assault anybody. He was maybe indecent and creep in some respects, depending on what account you remember or what account you believe. I think there was one about indecent exposure, but if we have to grade a level of nastiness, I would say potentially raping somebody and maybe whipping at your piece because you're trying to be too forward. I say the rape definitely oversees the whipping at your piece. I mean, the whipping at your piece is still a problem, don't get me wrong, but the point remains, I've not really been a fan of how he's kind of dealt with all the issues. And I guess I've been vindicated somewhat because now, especially prior to the prior video that I made about basically, what did he say? No, yeah, so Bryan Callen said in one of his earlier videos that I played, of I think an update of his show, the Bryan Callen report, he mentioned that he was going back on tour. He was going to launch that Bookless Book Club, and he was also going to go on tour. And I said it was ill-advised. I don't think that was a good idea, because as much as I commend his attitude to be like, hey, I did nothing wrong, so I'm going to go try and live my life, right? I'm going to go try and put food on the table, help out my family, I got to provide for my kids, my family, whatever payments he has to make, whatever he has to do in his life, he's within his right to try and make the best of a bad situation. But unfortunately, in the era that we live in, the world that we live at the moment, if you're accused of such a crime, you have to clear your name before you can go around trying to go about your life regular or kind of resume your everyday life. You just can't do it with these allegations over your head, because guess what happens, especially if you're a comedian, if you decide to go on tour and you announce the dates because you want to sell the tickets and sell it out, because Bryan Callen isn't Louis CK, unfortunately. He needs to advertise these shows ahead of time, people to go out and buy the tickets. What's going to happen is that the detractors, if you're according to DSP, but whatever, the people that don't like you and the people that think you're guilty, they're going to make it their mission to cancel you or to cancel the shows that you're appearing on, to send you a message that, hey, by the way, we still think you're a bad person, we still think you did this really heinous crime, and if the court system can't punish you, we're going to punish you by canceling your ability to make a living. That's what cancel culture effectively is. And for some reason, Bryan thinks cancel culture doesn't apply to him. I don't know why that is. I don't know why he's approaching it this way. I don't know whether or not his friends aren't talking to him and they've sort of left him to do it on his own, but I generally think it's a bad idea. And again, I've been proven right, because now we have this article from a place called Pajiba, and they've basically gone in on him like Sonic, right? And the article says the following: alleged rapist Bryan Callen is touring, and Jen Kirkman is understandably outraged. Jen Kirkman, I guess, is one of the women in the scene that was kind of leading the charge in terms of getting men in the comedy scene to sort of own up to their mistakes, to hold their other male comedians accountable. And she's generally just been, lighting the fire underneath the asses of some of the people that have been accused, and just basically being the person that's like, hey, I don't forget what's happened, right? So she's basically the sworn enemy of some of these comedy store comedians who just want to carry on and just ignore it and pretend like nothing happened, which I guess, again, never good nor bad, but I just think if you're the one that's being accused of doing such a heinous crime, you need to clear your name, because if you don't, someone like a Jen Kirkman is going to make it their mission to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did, and to stop any kind of possibility for you to kind of advance or to move on from it, because whatever. So the article says the following: it says, in further evidence that power of cancel culture is widely overhyped, and that's not true at all, because he's still cancelled. He can't go to his own show. This is the thing I hate about some of these people, right? Again, I don't think cancel culture is a good thing in general, but I understand the premise. I understand that sometimes there is such a heinous crime that's committed that there's no way of somehow, maybe the time has elapsed, maybe there's no way of gathering actual real evidence. But if there's no way to actually have somebody, be convicted and be thrown into a prison because they did something too really heinous back in the day, the only way that you can get some kind of reprisal is to effectively, quote unquote, cancel them, right, for whatever career that they have. Because for some odd reason, like what quote did that come from? I'm gonna say it was an economist. He said something like, the worst always end up on top, right? Who was it by? I remember this quote. It always pops into my head whenever I think of something. So the worst The worst make it to the top. Who's this by? It's a quote by Hayek, right? Yeah, it's a famous quote by Hayek. There you go. I got it here. Because that's what generally happens. That's why cancel culture works, because usually the worst type of people definitely do make it to the top, according to Hayek here, right? Let me quickly pull up this article. It says Hayek was right. The worst do get to the top. Inspired the freedoms, a remarkable global response in recent years, from the collapse of the Soviet Empire to the growth of privatization. There is no sign yet that social necessities with silly and destructive schemes. The express explanation of why and how such people get in positions of power is still found in the Why the Worst Get on Top, which is a chapter 10 of F.A. Hayek's masterpiece, The Road to Serfdom. So if that is the truth and we are to believe so, I'm not mad at cancel culture if you're gonna try and get somebody out of the paint, because that's the only way you got to do it. But to say it's overhyped isn't true, because his career has been cancelled somewhat. He can't go on his own show. His best friend Joe Rogan, who has the biggest show on the planet, doesn't ever mention him. His friends don't talk about him because they don't want any of that mud to be placed onto them. He's essentially been, ostracized from his own community. He's lost any kind of meaning, any kind of way of making an income. That is cancelled, so it's not overhyped. So let's continue. Bryan Callen is still touring comedy clubs in weeks after 4 women accused him of sexual misconduct, including sexual assault. The former Goldberg star and Crystalia cohort, who promised fans he would not lay low, is currently listed as to appear at several clubs in the coming weeks. Fellow comedian stand-up Jen Kirkman is understandably outraged. And I mentioned it in my video prior about the Bookless Book Club. It was a really ill-advised for him to announce he's going on tour. You're not going on tour. No one wants to see you. You should be trying to bloody clear your name as opposed to going on tour. This is not the again. It's just so. Sometimes I want, and that's why I really do think, as much as people like to rag on Brendan, he's the best thing to happen to Bryan Callen. Without Brendan, like Bryan would be, I don't know where he'd be in his career right now. He's a great stand-up comedian, but his moves that he makes are just so. I don't know, man. For as smart as he can sound, sometimes he really does do things in a really dumb way. And now look, he's being essentially, all these gigs will definitely get cancelled by the end of the week if this carries on. If Jen keeps retweeting and sharing what she's sharing on social, his tours are done, right? He's going to be completely over, and then he's going to be, ranting and raving on his show about something else later. But hey, it says the marvelous Mrs. Maisel writer Jen Kirkman, as you can see here, she's got that look in her eye. She's definitely determined. Took to Twitter to call on male comedians to be allies. They claim they all are, and call out the clubs who are booking these alleged rapists. There's a quote from her on Twitter. It says, "Dear male comedians, I'm out of fucks. You've let us all down again. Remember 3 months ago when you all wanted to help to change the culture? We still see you. You're either afraid or don't care. These are the two options." Now, that's unfair. To be honest, if you went to help when it happened, right, when it was so fresh, I get the sentiment. But now it's not really your business if you're not involved in this. You didn't do anything wrong. You're kind of, essentially we're all going through a global pandemic. You've probably got your own worries, your own things you need to look after. It's actually the responsibility of somebody like a Jane Kirkman, who is pretty prominent voice of displeasure when it comes to some of these actions from some of the bigger people in the comedy scene in LA. So she should use her platform. She's verified. She's got a Netflix special. Like, it's good enough what she's doing, and her and her friends sort of sounding the alarm and let people know, hey, this is not acceptable. But to expect other people who aren't involved in this, who don't have any skin in the game, who don't have anything to do with it whatsoever, if anything, they're probably in a really in a really selfish way. They're probably waiting for everyone to sort of like kill each other so that they can have spots that they can go and appear on. Like, that's probably the main name in the game. But let's hear what she has to say anyway, regardless.
A few months ago, I wrote like 85-point thread about how you can help change the culture of sexism in comedy. Now, I don't know if it's because the pandemic's still going. It doesn't really seem like there is comedy. Well, what a great time to help rebuild it and change the culture. Now that clubs are really struggling, like, you do have a little bit of power here. So
the power thing again. Like, if we want to address these things, let's not be pointing at each other. Let's instead work together, right? I guess, again, I'm not a comedian. I don't know anything about none of this stuff, but I would assume the best way to kind of get people to be on your side is to not chastise them in public. You probably should be trying to get them on your side by maybe encouraging them, maybe trying to convince them, maybe trying to empower them, maybe trying to make them your actual ally instead of being your attack dog, whatever it is. But I don't think this approach is the best way. Again, from the outside looking in, I don't know what's going on in there.
By the way, male comedians, I knew you would never do anything about it because you're all really afraid. because you've all always had each other and you've always thrown the women under the bus, even the alternative comedians. Like,
I don't think that's fair either. I don't think they throw anyone. I think they throw everyone under the bus, as proven with Crystalia and Bryan Callen. LA seems like such a cutthroat place to be in. Entertainment in general, I'd assume, actors, comedic actors, stand-ups, improv, they're just 10 a penny in LA, in California, or in America, or in the world, right? Everyone's funny. Not everyone's funny. Well, a lot of people can be funny. A lot of people are really good at what they do in that mode of funny. So when they get out to Hollywood, and the opportunities are even more limited than they are anywhere else in the world, because there's only a certain amount of spots that people can take, it's no surprise that people are going to be a little bit backstabby and only look after their own self-interest and sort of throw their own friends under the bus. So if Bryan Callen's quick to like dismiss that, is quick to kind of make it seem as if he doesn't know Chris and say that they don't tour together, he's never seen him do anything bad because they don't ever go on tour, and then all these pictures of him and Dalia get erased from his stream, from his feed, you shouldn't expect people of that ilk to then stand up for women that they don't know, who have alleged something that they can't prove. It's not going to happen if they can't back their own friends, right? Again, serious allegations, don't get me wrong, but if they can't back their own friends, what makes you think they're going to back you? Again, that's what I mean. Like, you have to, this whole chastising thing is a little bit of a bad tactic in that regard. These guys are just, they're a bit, not lily livered, they don't have any backbone, so you can't really suggest that in that regard. I think, again, she's got the platform, she's got the connects, she's blue check mark, she's got a special on Netflix, like, you're doing a pretty good job in that regard yourself. You don't need to cajole guys who probably don't give a fuck about what's going on in general, to be completely honest, to try and get on your side. They're not going to help in any way, shape or form. I don't think so.
Guys, we see you, we've always seen you. I'm out of fucks to give at this point, and I'm batshit crazy from this pandemic, so I don't care. I don't care if all of comedy goes. I just don't care.
She doesn't care if all comedy goes, but then she wants people that have the power to readdress the balance.
I don't care if I'm liked. I don't care. So I'm just having fun writing on the Twitter of clubs that book rapists, even if their clubs are owned by people that I perform for. You're just adding your opinion. I'm not trying to get anyone's dates canceled, but...
Yeah, you are. Again, this is the thing with this issue. So many people... Cancel culture does exist. It's not overhyped, and if you are going around in clubs of people that you think shouldn't be playing at places, you're obviously doing it with the intent of getting their gigs cancelled. Now, do I think it's the right way to go about things? Probably not, but I understand the sentiment. I get it. If you can't charge this guy for the crime that he allegedly did, right, then the best way to attack this person is through their pocket, right? That's the only way that they're going to quote unquote learn, listen, and that's the only way you're going to kind of get your message across. I get it, but to make it out to be like anything other than canceling somebody and making sure they don't have a living is a little bit disingenuous. It is what it is, isn't it? You have to sleep with that's the thing. You have to go to, maybe they're just convinced, like I said, maybe they're just convinced that they're doing something fundamentally right, because that's just maybe the case, isn't it? They're just convinced that this is what I'm doing is the right thing, regardless of because in general, if you think about it, canceling Bryan Callen, right, his gigs is essentially removing his ability to provide for his family, removing his ability to support his mother of his children, removing the ability for him to pay for his kids to go to school, right? So it's affecting people that have nothing to do with the allegations with the crimes that he's been accused of. And again, if you want to get metal with it, it's effectively, it's affecting a single mother, right? Somebody that's already going to find it difficult to, keep a roof over her head in California with 2 kids. It gets a bit weird when you really think about it.
Why not, like, clubs already have stopped tweeting about how Bryan Callen's coming to town because I was so annoying. And then customers joined in because they're like, we don't want to support something like this. Now, I'm not saying take his date away. I'm just saying add your voice, because clubs always say we have free speech and we love, the doing what the marketplace wants. Hey, if the marketplace wants to see a guy with his dick out, we book him. Well, does the marketplace ever speak up the other way? No. But male comedians, you could just simply tweet like, oh, it's not that.
Well, that's a good point. I think that was when everyone was getting on. That's okay. I get the complaints. People are complaining that remember when Lucy K was going through, and he was popping up in certain clubs. So I think he popped up in some places, and of course, naturally, some people were upset because they were like, "Hey, I didn't pay to see this guy. I believe he's a creep. I don't condone anything that he did, and I don't think he should have a career. Blah blah blah. Get him out of my space." So they naturally got upset, and they had every right to be upset, right? Because if you pay a ticket to see someone, and then some other guy you don't like pops up, you're gonna be pissed off. So then clubs changed their tactic and decided to announce that he was coming, and then it was up to the market to decide, our customers, whether or not they wanted to pay to see him or not. And of course, with Louis C.K.'s star power and the fact that, in my opinion, he was pretty much a degenerate on the stage anyway, a lot of fans kind of thought that they knew who he was, so they weren't surprised by whatever he was alleged to have done. And maybe some people formed their own opinion about the story, and maybe thought he didn't do anything bad anyway. But whatever the case is, they decided to buy tickets and sold out his shows wherever he went. And that obviously rubbed the people the wrong way. So that's the issue. The issue for me isn't that what she's saying is partly true, but I think the issue is that if the market decided if the market said we want to see Bryan Callen, they sold out the show, she will still be annoyed that the comedy club's putting them on. So that's why you have to pick your battles a little bit. Because I think you can't really blame the comedy clubs for putting on a big comedian who hasn't been charged for anything, right? Let's just get down to being accused of something is one thing, but he hasn't been charged in the court of law. Nothing's been proven. They're all allegations from the time being. They're heinous. They're really bad. And if I'm a Bryan Callen fan. I still think he should lay low. He shouldn't be trying to put on shows. It's in bad taste, right? He has some really heavy allegations over his head. He should be trying to clear his name. He should be trying to make amends. Whatever he should be doing. He shouldn't be trying to go and tell dick jokes on stage. This is not the time. But if the market does decide that they want to see him and they think it's okay because he hasn't been charged with anything, then you have to let them go and see him too. You can't then go and carry on phoning up the place, calling in bomb threats, picketing outside the club. That's taking it too far. You made your stance. You made your opposition clear. People know where you stand. You just kind of move on. But again, knowing this whole issue, the whole problem for me in this isn't what these women are saying. It's fundamentally Bryan Callen. He should have never announced he's going on the tour. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, why is he going on tour where these allegations are still hovering over his head? Like, it doesn't make sense. His own best friend in Joe Rogan isn't mentioning his name ever again on air or in his own podcast, especially now he's on Spotify. And now he thinks it's best to go on stage. And now look, he has fucking articles being written about him and Jen Kirkman committing a minute and a half and multiple Twitter threads about him and what he's going through. It's just a very, very poor decision making in his
cool. And then you could listen to the Jackie and Laurie show and find out like what exactly is not cool about it when the whole staff has to be around someone that's been accused of rape. But you guys always ask how you can help and then you never do it. It's so funny. But I know you're busy taking down Trump and that makes you feel like you're doing.
But again, I think it's unfair. Like, people have their own careers to look after. It is what it is. Let's move on with the article. So it said, back in June, Kirkman offered a lengthy thread with action items that stand-ups could take to help make the shared work environment safer for female colleagues. Again, these are things that probably need to be done in the long term with a bit more cooperation, with less kind of finger pointing. Again, that's probably another story for another day. We continue. And then it says, only one male ally who is doing the work is Gabriel Tigerman, husband of Theo Tigerman. That's what lady that accused Bryan Callen of rape in 1999. And again, this is the issue. If I remember the story correctly, again, Amy Kaufman was a little bit loose with some of the fiction, but if I remember correctly, they did kind of allude to the fact that he might have roofied her, allegedly, right? So if I'm being accused of something like that, like, this is not the time to be announcing shows. It's not the time to be trying to launch secret Patreon podcasts. You know what I mean? You're going to try and clear your name so you could go back to do what you're doing before at the level you're doing it. Like, sitting in some nondescript studio with a wobbly table doing conspiracy theory podcasts with somebody that you didn't probably speak to that much prior in Sam Tripoli, who's been an absolute gent in terms of how he's backed him in public. He's probably, again, Sam Tripoli doesn't know Bryan Callen as well as flipping Joe Rogan does, and he's backing him more than he is. So it's like, yeah, man. If all the things, again, anyway, let's continue. Looking over the websites for the club listed above reveals some interesting details. The Helium Comedy Club chain not only has Callen performing, but also has promoting his appearance from the Shane Gillis, who might remember getting booed from Saturday Night Live. Again, see, look who just his own surface action is getting Shane Gillis's name getting thrown in the mud. The Kansas City Improv has Callen's show promoted on its main page. Addison Improv has him listed on the calendar for the end of October. Meanwhile, the Bricktown Comedy Club seem to have scrubbed Callen's name from their website already. One place has already knocked him off a Google search of his name. Bryan Callen turns up there below. She says, however, if you click the link, it takes you to the main page where Callen is not listed. On the date shown in Google Preview, no Callen is listed. Still, it's unclear if it's been cancelled or Bricktown's laying low until the Twitter storm blows over. Cool. Kirkman and Tiggerman shared their profound disappointment with the men in comedy, saying the following. Kirkman said, thanks for doing this work. Hope you're as disgusted as I am at the male comedians who won't say anything. And I don't even mean friends of Callen. I mean the good guys. Weak. Just fucking weak. But again, what do you expect, right? They don't help any, like, LA comedians, they're just the worst, isn't it? The friendship doesn't exist. They're all trying to protect their own shows, protect their own agents, protect their own opportunity to get gigs. It is what it is. So to suggest that somehow people that are not involved in it, that aren't even their friends, are going to somehow jump in to be allies, it's just not going to happen. They're waiting for the guy to get cancelled completely so they can take his spot at the comedy club. Do you know what I mean? Comedy store. That's what they're waiting for. And then I guess the husband of Tiggerman replied to 100% since the day the article came out. My wife and I have been talking about the silence of the male comics, the good ones. It's disgusting, it's disappointing, and it's deafening. Yeah. But again, I don't know. I think the onus is on the people that actually give a shit to make the change. If people don't give a shit, that don't want to get involved, let them be in it. I don't think that's anything. That's not a slight on them in that regard. It might be a slight, but again, it's not really their business. She said, okay, continue here. The article continues, says Kirkman explained it's up to comedians and comedy patrons to speak up when clubs book alleged abusers. Of course, but then it's also up to the clubs. So you speak up, you voice your discontent, and then it's up to the clubs to have a final decision. If they want to buckle under the pressure and say, yeah, we're going to take the show off, then cool. But if they want to continue putting the show on, you have to respect that decision too. It's heinous, it's bad, it's whatever, it's distasteful, but it is what it is in that regard. But again, Callen, why did you announce the shows? Why are you going on tour? Why are you not trying to clear your name? Who knows? It continues here. She's going in, like she's tweeting a lot here in this article. It says, I feel alone. You're asking guys to give a shit and calling stuff out, which makes me feel insane. You know, I think COVID is probably doing that too, being indoors so long and just seeing people that probably, there's the thing too with counterculture that's really interesting, especially during COVID. When somebody does something as heinous allegedly as what he Callen's been accused of, and you're seeing them on your timeline still, you're seeing them, you know, you're seeing his Patreon flipping blow up, you know, thousands of pounds a month being pledged to him and his efforts to get back on his feet, and you know, it must irk you. Again, it's not jealousy, it's not bitterness, but I can understand that contempt that's going to be brewing when you're somebody like a Jen Kirkman who maybe thinks you don't really have the same opportunities that he has because he's a man. So this is why I think someone like a Callen should be a lot more sensitive of the climate, right? And just be a little bit understanding that sometimes it's not even you, it's what you represent that's actually the problem. And the best way that he could have maybe addressed it wasn't to maybe, you know, openly chastise the cancel culture when the allegations come out. It's like, this isn't cancel culture, Callen. You're being accused of touching up women when they don't want to be touched up. You're being accused of raping some. Do you know what I mean? This isn't cancel culture. This is way beyond cancel culture. It's like, oh, it's such a donut, man. Again, I'm a big fan of his, but he's fumbled this so badly. She said here, it's not about what she said. Just continue here. She said, I'm realizing the mentality of the dudes is that if they can't fix it all this second, nothing matters. That's not really the case. A comedy club deleted this excited tweet about Callen coming because about 25 people wrote gross under it, and all it took to them is tripping over themselves. She continues to say, it's not about cancelling comedians or ruining club lives. It's about making people who book rapists have to put it up with some uncomfortable feedback of their business decisions. That's it. It's so much simpler and way funner. It's punk rock than you're making it. Yeah, you can spin it that way, but you know, it is what it is. And if you want to cancel someone, cancel them, but don't try and make it seem like, you know, you're doing anything but that. But continues here, so some communities have responded, supporting Kirkman and Tiggerman's cause by adding their own voice. Some person called Frank Kunoff, who I'm assuming they're all probably in the same scene because I don't really recognize any of the names. They're all probably improv people who naturally makes sense now, because if you listen to Joe Rogan or any of those podcasts from the LA comedy scene, they're always attacking the improv people and saying how, you know, corny and lame they are. So it makes sense now that the people actually being accused of the the horrible crimes are the ones from the Comedy Store, the legit comics. So it makes sense that these guys are dancing on their graves, and it completely makes sense. I get it. And then another person here called May Martin, another person called Gray Delise Griffin, who repeated another tweet that she, I think, made another day when I think the story actually leaked about her and a friend going to see Callen, going to a Comedy Store and then walking out because they saw Callen, because he allegedly raped one of their mates. And it continues here. Another person, Hob Gentleman, and then I guess the update is that Bricktown already has cancelled the show. Bricktown Comedy Club has confirmed that they cancelled Callen's booking. Here they said this shows have been cancelled. So again, the point remains, man. Like, you can ignore cancel culture as much as you want. You can pretend it doesn't exist, but it's gonna come after you, especially if you're not, especially if you haven't defended yourself adequately. You can't then go about trying to, restart your career in any way, shape, or form. Especially Callen too. He's not known. He's not at that level of fame where he can essentially dictate how things go the way he wants it to go. He still needs the benefit of the doubt. He still needs, fans, and I don't know if new fans to kind of buy ticket. I don't know. He just hasn't got that hardcore of a base like a Lucy K would have in terms of kind of riding through that storm. And again, it's his own fault, man. It's his own issue. He has to kind of sort out that way. Again, disappointing as a fan, because I think, his friends probably could have helped him out a bit more. But again, this might be karma for the Crystalia thing, because I think that really, and then the COVID denial stuff prior, like, it's just all mad karma in it that's maybe coming back at him. I'm not too sure, but hey, let me know what you think in the comments down below, man. Do you think Jen Kirkman's going way too hard? Do you think she's deranged? Do you think she's well within her rights to call up some of her male comedian friends? What do you think male comedians should be doing? Should they be trying to help out and trying to hold clubs accountable? Or is it the responsibility of the people who are actually being affected, i.e. the women, i.e. the allies of these women, to try their best to hold the clubs accountable and to try and kind of create a safer space for comedians within the entertainment industry? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments down below. Okay, next, let's move on from that one. So a lot about that. Oh, we got an update here on Crystalia, a little short one, because no one really mentions Crystalia's name anymore. He's sort of like what was he? The Boogeyman, right? Or whatever what was that horror film where you can't repeat the person's name? Whatever it is, he is that person. They do not utter his name in any way, shape, or form. Which, again, considering the allegations other comedians have hovering over their heads, Crystalia's crimes are relatively tame if you really get to the meat and bones of the accusations, right? It's him just being a dog, trying to holler at everything that moves in every state that he visits when he's on tour. Maybe he slipped up and didn't check the DOBs of some of the profiles that he was messaging and just generally got excited, whatever it may be. And if you remember his quote, like his statement is like, oh, he let the lifestyle get the best to take over him or whatever, right? That is essentially what happened, and that's basically it. I think he's also maybe guilty of being a bit of a dick. I think from some of the accounts you read of some of the girls, he's not really the best of company when he knows what he wants from said individual, allegedly. He doesn't necessarily go out his way to make it a fun evening. Let that be said in that regard. And again, are these crimes? Not really. Is he a bit of a dickhead? Yeah. Would you recommend him to your sister or to your best mate? Probably not. But he's probably not enough to cancel his career. But I understand in his position, especially considering his image and the fact that he's teetotal and he seems pretty normal, and to suddenly have this not weird, but to suddenly have your fetishes and your behind closed doors desires and everything, laid bare for the world to see, it can be really embarrassing. So it might just be more of an embarrassing thing that he's laying low, but he hasn't really said nothing since then. Been some pictures of him hanging around and shit and going shopping, whatever, but that's about it. You haven't heard much from Crystalia, and of course his friends have not really said nothing. You don't really expect much from most of them, but some of the others you expect a little bit more, and I guess one of them being Bobby Lee. But Bobby Lee's been going through a bit of a tough time himself, right? I think there was a spat where I felt like there were old clips of Bobby Lee on what's his name, on the David Cho podcast back in the day with Asa Akira saying some wild stuff. Maybe the stories were embellished, maybe they weren't, but regardless, it felt as if there was a bit of a concentrated effort underground to kind of cancel Bobby Lee too. So I think ever since then he's been kind of on like a a reputational damage tour. Kyla went on another podcast recently and said something about, all Bobby Lee's stories are fake. He makes them up. He's lying. Bobby Lee went around and basically tried his best to dance around some of the accusations and again make it seem as if he exaggerates stories and be self-deprecating. But he did seem he was conscious enough that the climate in the industry made it seem as if like he couldn't say anything positive or negative about Crystalia because he was afraid of any attention it might bring to stuff that he said in the past. So it comes to this clip I'm going to show you. This is the recent podcast of this past weekend with Theo Vaughn, episode number 297, where he invites Bobby Lee down. And, again, it's a fun podcast. I'm a big fan of Theo. Bobby and Theo have great chemistry. The banter is obviously amazing. Loads of good laugh out loud moments, but they have a short segment here where they touch upon, the difficulty when one of your close friends is accused of a heinous crime and, of how to kind of stand up for him and back him up. So I'll play a bit of the clip and then we can talk about it on the other side.
I get your number, this or that. You get scared of, I get scared of people like sharing that or like screen grabbing it and like, I don't know. It just feels like, people are going to use it to mess with you. I mean, even after what happened with D'Elia, like, a lot of the stuff that got shared about him.
What?
A lot of the stuff that got shared about him.
Look at Bobby's reaction when he mentioned his name. Look at his face.
People are going to use it to mess with you. I mean, even after what happened with D'Elia, like, a lot of the stuff that got shared about him.
What?
A lot of the stuff that got shared about him, none of it was illegal stuff.
Yeah.
And they just, they're like, oh, what about this 22-year-old woman that he was communicating with? And you're like, well, there's nothing, it might be there's a difference between being a dog of a man and being a pervert or a criminal perv.
What I have to say about him, because I didn't, and I don't want to get in trouble. That's the thing. I've been pretty silent about, talking about this.
Yeah, me too.
But I want to say one thing, which I'm trying to gather the words, is that the allegations are shocking, but I do have to say that he's just personally one of the nicest, generous, good guys that I've ever met in the business,
And again, this is the issue that I had with the beginning with all the allegations of all these guys in LA, right? The allegations are heinous, right? They're deep, really serious allegations that need to be taken seriously. And of course, your heart goes out to victims, alleged or whatever. No one should go through what they had allegedly gone through. But I still maintain, if you're the friend of somebody like this who's gone through something, even in private, I'm obviously said it myself, I would want to get the facts from my friend in some way, shape or form, and then make my own decision up that way, right? But even with the Crystalia stuff, when Bryan Callen and Bryan Callen went on their podcast straight away when the news came out and just started bawling in front of the camera, damage limitation, distance themselves from him straight away without even talking to the guy first. He's owed a conversation at least even if it's one. When you're a friend with somebody, they're allowed at one conversation. If they murdered somebody, stole money, whatever, they're allowed one conversation. And it's up to you after that conversation to decide whether or not you want to be their friend or not. In my decision, in my point of view, unless you I guess the only thing would be eradicated and I would never be a friend again would definitely be rape, would definitely be touching minors, right? That's completely done. There's no conversation to be had. But anything else outside of that, I owe you a conversation. I owe you the chance to explain yourself, and you kind of deserve that from me being a friend, right? You're meant to kind of be there for each other, in the good and the bad. So to see those guys be so quick to dismiss the allegations, especially when on paper they weren't that serious, they weren't allegations that no one could ever come back through. There is a road to redemption. There's a road to forgiveness in some way, shape or form. There are lessons to be learned from it. Why not be okay just saying, hey, he's my friend and I support him as a friend. Of course, I don't condone what he did, but I'm going to try and be there for as much as I can because I don't kind of let go of my friends. I don't remove them, whatever. Because think about it. Quentin Tarantino said the same thing about bloody what's his name, Harvey Weinstein, and look at what Harvey Weinstein did, right? When Harvey Weinstein was first accused, they kind of quizzed Quentin Tarantino about his relationship with Harvey, because obviously he greenlit a lot of, or some of the more successful movies that Quentin Tarantino directed, and he said quite clearly, hey, he's my friend. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the allegations. I haven't really read up on them, but I've heard they sound really serious. But please allow me some time to reflect, and I'll get back to you later, right? But he maintained that, hey, this is my friend. I'm going to give them the moment or the chance to explain themselves. I'm going to read up a little bit on what's happening. I'm going to get back to you later. And then, of course, once he kind of saw the kind of severity of the accusations, he kind of distanced himself straight away. But even he had the temerity to kind of give the guy, a chance to explain himself somewhat, because he saw him as a friend. He didn't know the other side of him. Same could be applied to Chris D'Elia and stuff. That's the only thing that's a bit annoying about it, really. And again, in Bobby Lee's case too, to be fair to him as well, he's been quite open about how much of a, not even a bad way, but he's a bit of a pussy in that regard. He does, because he's kind of like Callen in that way. He's been so mistreated by the industry. He's got some of the most cringy, embarrassing stories about auditions. I remember once him mentioning something about him dressing up as a ninja for an audition. Like, he's been treated like dog shit in the industry, right? He's been through a lot. So he suddenly now got success. His podcast is popping. He's got, obviously because of the fame of his podcast, that's allowed him to leverage that to get more acting gigs and stuff. And he's been able to rebuild his reputation in the industry. I understand that he's a bit afraid to kind of talk about it because he doesn't want to ruin the thing that he has now, especially he's in his 50s now or something. Even though he looks great for his age, he doesn't want to ruin it now. I get it, but I don't know, man. Part of me still thinks like, doesn't your friend is owed a bit of public support when he's getting trashed online so much? I don't know, man. I don't know.
Him and his family have only been, even when I was struggling and stuff, the sweetest people, and he's only been the sweetest guy.
So imagine how you feel if you're Kristen. You've opened your doors to your home to him. Your family, your mum and dad love him like a son, and then he doesn't say anything about you in public or back you up. It must sting, innit? It must sting. But again, I guess it's LA, innit?
I've not said that out loud, and because we live in a world where you get this fear that, like, am I going to get canceled too, and whatnot. But I've been also thinking about, why can't I say that?
Yeah.
Why can't I say, that?
Because you're a coward, basically. It's not a bad thing to say, but it is. You're a coward. When you wrap up all your value within an industry, that determines when and when you can get paid, when and when you can work, who you can work with, you're going to do whatever you can to stay within their good books. Again, it's not a slight. I just think there are parallels to this. He is kind of like a Callen in that decision, in that way. I think Callen would have done the same thing. If Callen didn't get any allegations against him, he wouldn't have mentioned Chris D'Elia ever again. Because he's, of course, as well, somebody who only made it late in life due to the success of his podcast, which again, the same, because Bobby Lee was mentioned that Kalila was the reason why Tiger Belly popped off the way it did. Brendan Shaw was the reason why The Fire and the Kid popped off the way it was. So I'm sure they both deep down know that they've only got this chance because of the people that they've kind of passed by in their life and they met at the right time, and they don't want to fuck it up, right? Because they know how bad it can get for them. So I understand the reluctance to speak up, but it's nothing more than just being a coward recently, really. That's basically what it is all about.
Chris D'Elia is just one of the nicest guys I've ever met personally in my life. I've never seen him do all the things that he's been accused of doing. I'm also I'm on the side of always victims. I feel if people have been victimized. But that's not what I'm saying right now. All I'm saying is that, that's the thing that I've been scared to say, because I don't want people to think that I'm defending him. Mm-hmm. I'm not. I'm just saying that, that's what I know of him, that he's just being a good guy. Do you have the same experience?
I mean, Chris has been super nice to me. I mean, helpful with work. You and him are closer.
Yeah.
Because y'all have more of a history together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it's just so uncomfortable to say that, because it's like, Yeah,
and it shouldn't be. But it shouldn't mean just because we talk about someone that it means like we don't support somebody, that if somebody was taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I don't support the behavior, right? That's the behavior. If someone's victimized, You know what I mean? I'm not. I'm on their fucking side. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that why can't I say too? You know what I mean? That he is just my opinion about him. You know, it's like
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
When people are more than one thing, you know, like people are
Like I
more-
said before, like people are complex creatures, right?
Totally.
It's like when people like, who's that guy?
Huh? He's not here live, but he is a human, and
And no, I want to say add one last thing. It's like the same thing as I feel about Carlos Mencia, right? And what he went through. It's like, you know, I was his opening act when all that shit went down.
wow, really?
Yeah. I was
And
his
what'd you do? Did you speak up, or did you not say
No, I
anything?
fucking cut ties and I fucking ran like a guy.
Wow,
know
do you
what I
feel
mean?
bad about that now or no?
You know, there is parts of me that feel bad, but
There we go, and that's the evidence, and I guess that maybe explains why he's so uncomfortable around Joe Rogan. Because I think, you know, everyone's always clamoring, oh, why isn't Bobby Lee going on Joe Rogan Experience? And, you know, he's always kind of making excuses. And I think Joe even told him once at the comedy store, hey, you should come and do the show. And he doesn't want to follow up on it because he's weird about calling people and texting him and asking for things. But I think fundamentally, he does feel a little bit like a fraud. And he probably does feel like deep down, they still look at Bobby Lee with a side eye because he was so close to Carlos Mencia. Of course, Carlos Mencia, if you know the law, he was the comedian who Joe Rogan sort of accosted on stage because he had been stealing jokes from a group of comedians at the comedy store, people like Irish Free and others. And, you know, he like do this really fucked up thing where he'd watch them do their joke and then come up later on when he has his prime slot and do the joke on stage, or, you know, or just do his flip of the joke and then kind of feign ignorance. And of course, Bobby Lee being, you know, somebody that kind of toured on him on the road with him, he was, you know, a close ally, close friend. And he essentially decided to cut ties with him as soon as, you know, the comedy store turned on Carlos Mencia. And at that time, Carlos Mencia had a lot more clout in the comedy store than Joe Rogan did. He was like the main guy. So for Joe Rogan to even do that in the first place was a big thing. It was a big deal at the time. And I think the video, you know, it's out there. It's probably one of the most watched ones of Joe Rogan stuff outside of the stuff he did with on Fear Factory and stuff beforehand. But yeah, Bobby Lee's got kind of some previous history of kind of being a bit of a coward and not backing up his friends. Maybe in the Carlos Mencia thing, it's a bit difficult. It's a bit harsh to say that because, you know, he's at the infancy of his career. He probably did bet on the right horse in the long term, right? You know, staying sweet with the LA sort of like comedy crew was probably a better idea than kind of siding with Carlos Mencia, right? It made sense, but if you're his friend still, you'd probably you owe your friends that loyalty. That's all you owe them. Loyalty. And there's a part of me still that thinks, not regardless, there are crimes, of course, like I said, touching up kids, raping people, you know, you should be excommunicated. But apart from that, you should just stick with your friends, man. I don't know where it is. Like, again, I don't have many friends. I'm not the most sociable guy in the world, but I think if you have friends that you've known for years, you've developed bonds with, you've got to know them over the year, you owe them that. Especially if you want to see them get better, you owe them just to kind of be around and help them to kind of, you know, become a better person. Even for the next friend, right? That's what you want to do. You don't just completely cut people out of your life because they make a mistake or something. That's not how the world works. We all make mistakes. We all fuck up and do crazy stuff. But the only way we're going to learn is if the people next to us can kind of pull us up on it in some way, shape, or form. But again, I won't play the whole clip because it's a bit long, but definitely check it out. The whole episode is really good. Bobby Lee and Theo Vaughn talking about everything with Chris D'Elia. And again, let me know your thoughts, man. Do you understand where Bobby Lee's coming from? Do you think he is a coward, like I'm saying? Again, I'm not saying it to be rude because I'm a fan of his. I love Tiger Bay. I love what they do, but it is what it is, isn't it? He didn't stand up for any of his friends. He probably would never stand up for his friends because he always cares about his career. It's funny because, you know, that is just how he is. And again, like I said, he's had some really terrible experiences in Hollywood, so I completely understand his risk aversion and him wanting to kind of make sure he doesn't lose whatever he has at the moment, because he generally is probably cognitively aware that if he does get cancelled, now it's over. He can't restart his career again, right? He just hasn't got it in him. You know, they don't call him the Slep King for nothing. But yeah, let me know what you think, man, of that. What Bobby Lee has to say. And is there actually a road for redemption for Chris D'Elia? Can he actually come back? Again, he's probably gonna back the right way in terms of just laying low, not doing a Bryan Callen, but can he ever come back and have another career? Can he ever come back and restart his career, or is it completely over for him? And if he can, how is he going to do that? Let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, that's your Agostinho Zinga Show, episode number 378. I've got an hour 20 in. Don't want to waste too much of your time. Thanks again for tuning in. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, even comment down below. If you're listening via the podcast app, please leave me a 5-star review and share the show with your friends. Download it, spread it, and if you can support the show via Patreon, please do. I want to buy a GoPro Hero 9. I want to upgrade this camera. I want to get some fisheye effects and shit and use it in other places. So definitely make sure you subscribe on Patreon. Patreon.com/Agostinho. That's Patreon.com/Agostinho. For as little as $1 per month, you get my audio podcast, right? The podcast that goes on stream, but earlier, before anybody else, 3 or 4 days before it goes on any platform on there. And I'll also be uploading some other bits and pieces, so definitely keep an eye out for that when it's available. But definitely check me out on Patreon, subscribe on there, don't delay. And of course, and check me out on Twitch too. I'll put the Twitch link in the show notes as well, so check me out on Twitch. I'm going to be started streaming on there very, very soon, doing a few sets. Of course, seeing as we're going to be in lockdown for another 6 months, why not get involved in that one? So again, thanks so much for tuning into the show. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Until next time, peace, take care, bye.